Hi, my name is Dr. Ryan Bates, and I teach in the Department of Education in Liberal Arts at Ashford University, specifically with graduate students in education, curriculum, and instruction. Today, I'll be presenting Creating Space to Engage, 5 effective tips for organizing your teaching practice. This presentation highlights the positive impact that routines can have in effectively managing an instructor's professional practice as an educator. I will share 5 tips on how I organize the short and long-term tasks of my teaching practice into effective and easily employable routines. Resources, strategies, and digital tool options will also be shared. I am a pretty organized individual. However, I found myself getting lost in what I had to do day to day and week to week in my teaching practice online, especially when I had multiple class sections going on at the same time. Felt like the fogginess was getting in the way of what I wanted to do with my classes, engage with my students and what we are learning about in the class. So I brainstormed on areas that I could become more efficient so I could spend my time where I wanted to in my professional practice, not where I had to. One of the first areas that I developed was the use of checklists. I've always loved lists, but they were more an ad hoc type system than something that I had formalized. I've refined these lists over time, but the overall structure is the same. They are my home base, so I know where to start from each day and each week. For example, here you can see how I break down all the different tasks I have to do in preparation for a new course start. After this week, I will break down each week, weeks 1 through 6. As I teach graduate courses, they are 6-week terms. And I break down from the discussions to grading to announcements and everything else that I want to make sure I accomplish week to week. The next tip is using folders to organize what you have. I love Dropbox. I've used it for years and years. It has my whole professional and academic life in it. Well, at least the parts since the computers and tech became commonplace, especially with cloud-based services. Over time, I've developed a series of folders that organize my work. I even have come to organize the files that are inside the folders to make sure they make sense to me and how I will use them. For example, I will number them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so they're in that order that I will not only use them, but how I want to see them in the folder. I am still revising the naming process of my files and don't have a formal system yet, but for what I do, it works. Keeping files organized in specific places in order has helped me streamline the setup of my classes, as well as things that I want to make sure I use or share with my students throughout the course. The next tip is creating an organizational system that houses bigger things like routines and tasks, including the use of digital notebooks. Evernote changed my life. I originally started using it to scan paper documents, receipts, etc., so I could stop hoarding paper versions of everything. My file cabinets were becoming overloaded and I needed to cut down on my paper footprint. Once I started using Evernote regularly, I realized I could use it as a digital notebook system, so I would no longer need paper copies of my to-do lists and other things that I would write down on paper. Recently, though, I've started using Notion, which is a newer digital notebook app. I was finding that I could not do certain things in Evernote that I wish I could, and then I found Notion, which is the app here on the right side. Evernote is here on the left. One of the major things was to easily connect different pages in my notebooks together. I'm still learning the ropes of Notion, but I'm liking it so far. For example, being able to connect pages that I can link between them much quicker than in Evernote. I still use Evernote, but it is mainly for scanning purposes at this point or keeping track of things at home. I've switched to Notion from my professional life. Perhaps one day, if I'm able to connect a scanner to Notion, I will make the switch completely, but for now, I am okay living in two different worlds. Next tip is about creating templates. I use templates for all sorts of things, including my course to-do lists, evergreen announcements that I use from course section to course section, and resources and other things I want to make sure I share with my students, whether that's in discussion forums or even assessments, including the feedback I give them. I know this last point about feedback can be touchy depending on one's perspective or experience. However, I've come to love using templates and discussion grade feedback in other communications with students, as I find it a launch and off point where I ensure I touch on certain points. Then I personalize the template to make sure I'm engaging with the student authentically and able to give them the support needed for their growth and success. These 5 areas of using routines, creating checklists, organizing files in a digital folder system, using a digital notebook, and creating templates have greatly streamlined my routine tasks in my teaching practice. This has allowed me to focus more on engaging with my students, providing meaningful feedback in the discussion forums and on assessments, and discover other ways that support my students' learning and their success. The type of tools and ways of doing that work for you may and most likely can look different than what works for me. I've come to realize that there's not one size fits all of organizing anything, including one's teaching practice. It is a highly personal experience. However, we can learn from one another on what works and what doesn't so we can determine how to make the most of our time and that we can share with our students. If you would like to discuss further any of the ideas that I presented here, or like to learn more about the tools and resources that I've shared, my experiences, I'd be more than happy to meet with you virtually and have conversations, and not only so you can learn from my experience, but also be able to learn from yours. You can send me an email, which is listed down below, and I'll get back to you. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and I hope you have a wonderful day.